Wow, what an amazing time to be in our industry, right? There's never been a more thrilling time to be talking about this stuff, right? Because everything is brand new. It's all exciting and new and changing. There's all these new technologies that we've never, ever had to consider before, except for the fact that Hyperloop was first patented in 1867. And almost all of the technologies that we're talking about today were almost fully developed in the 1933, 39, and 64 World's Fairs, particularly in the Futurama exhibit sponsored by General Motors that promised us a chicken in every pot and a General Motors car in every garage. And in fact, by 1939, we were already being promised autonomous vehicles right around the corner, right? It was going to happen, and the advertisements in the 1950s Popular Mechanics magazines were almost exactly the same as what we're seeing today, except for the fact that, you know, the board game has been replaced by a video game, and of course the children are gone, and the people are of ambiguous ethnicity, and the interior design is by Apple Computer. But that aside, like, all new, right? And even like the best vision of the city of the future is finally going to be delivered to us by Uber Aviation, because, you know, like, in the city of the future, you don't want to be stuck down at the ground level where it will continue to look like this. So, what do we do? Fortunately, as the previous speakers have already hinted at, there are some tremendous upsides to all this new technology. Part of it is the fact that because we let distractible humans hurl themselves at each other at 75 miles an hour in 2-ton steel boxes, we've killed 7 times as many Americans since 1929 by car than we have in all wars combined. As Nico already said, huge reduction in parking demand and tremendous opportunity to reclaim that half of land area in cities that's set aside for storing our metal boxes. We get some increased efficiency on the rural highways as we can cram cars and trucks closer together and still move them at high speed. And we've also got some interesting advantages with first and last mile connectivity, and this is particularly important as we suburbanize poverty. As we ask low-income households to live farther and farther away from jobs, autonomous vehicles can allow them to actually be connected, if not all the way into the city center, at least to the transit center where we no longer need to build parking. But one thing that autonomous vehicles will not do is solve our congestion problem, right? Very irritating. Congestion makes us sad. Perhaps some of you have seen my famous, awesome PowerPoint animation. So, you know, we have for 70 years been thinking that we can solve the congestion problem by, you know, just adding one more lane. Like, surely this time it will solve the problem, because we love faster driving, but it also means that, honey, why don't we move to the bigger, cheaper house farther away, because we just widened the road. And the problem, of course, with faster driving is it means more people drive, which brings us back to the problem that we started with. And if you're a technologist working in Silicon Valley, it's very easy to see the problems of the world through your own personal perspective, and to be stuck in traffic on the highway and think, surely one more lane over there would make it easier for me to drive faster to my suburban office park. And if I can't add one more lane over there, well, I'll just put one underneath the highway, right? That'll finally solve the problem. Or give me that flying car that I've been promised by the Hanna-Barbera cartoons since I was a kid, right? That will finally solve the problem. Well, no. Because as Emily Badger wrote in the New York Times, when technology gives us speed, we don't use that to save time. We use it to consume more space. And so all of these solutions to congestion are basically keeping us trapped in the same orientation that we've had since the 1950s. We should know better by now. Autonomous vehicle technology doesn't change the basic geometric limitations of mobility. I'm not a better person when I get on my bike, or I walk, or I take the bus. I just consume 1/10 of the urban space, as I do when I drive alone in my car. And that's the same whether I'm in the backseat of an Uber or in an autonomous vehicle, right? This is not about ideology, it's about basic geometrics. But we've got one thing, assuming we use this tool correctly, that can make the difference between the dystopic or the potentially better future. And that is the fact that the reason why autonomous vehicles are going to succeed, as opposed to personal rapid transit and monorail and Hyperloop and so on, is that autonomous vehicles take advantage of all of our existing right-of-way. They're able to use all of our existing infrastructure. Who owns that infrastructure? This is the public right-of-way. And the public has a critical responsibility to manage the public right-of-way for the public good. The streets are owned by cities, and to a certain degree, states and the federal government. You all who are in government and in transportation, your job is to manage that street for the public good. And this means making things work efficiently. It also means paying careful attention to those who are left behind by technological shift. It also means that we've got to give up on this bizarreness in America, where we have refused to socialize issues like public health care or housing. And the only thing that we have socialized in America is accommodation for the automobile. It means, as Congressman Blumenauer just told us, that we need to finally recognize that congestion is not a technological problem, but an economic problem. Congestion is what happens when the demand for mobility equals the supply. And congestion is only susceptible to economic solutions, not infrastructure solutions. You can either destroy your economy, Detroit solved its congestion problem for a while, or you can use price. And this means being thoughtful about price. It means if you're a rural area that needs to get goods to market, you can price by weight to make sure that as the gas tax drops to 0 and your sales tax declines, that you have money again for maintaining your roads. It means pricing by size. Like if you're in your giant Google RV with a hot tub in the back, you should pay more than if you're in a tiny little mini, AV. It means very importantly for cities, pricing by congestion. The right price for a road is always the price that allows traffic to move smoothly. And more importantly than that, as conversations have started here in this region, is we need to price for efficiency, which means pricing by empty seats. This means that, sure, if you're in your own Tesla, like, yeah, you can drive into downtown Portland, but for every empty seat that you've got to pay a multiplier against that. And that net revenue needs to go in order to provide better opportunities to those who will be left behind. For cities, it also means starting right now at managing the curb in order to accommodate the dramatic increase in curbside pickup and drop-off and eliminate that conflict between bikes and pickup and drop-off. Why do any cities still force developers to build more parking than was demanded in 1975, given the fact that we know parking demand is already in decline in cities? Manage your parking regulation for the public good, and yeah, don't even get me started on this. This is another hour lecture of shaming for all cities that I routinely do. Very importantly as well is to establish data protocols for the public good. We can't claim to be about the public good if we don't know how to define that, and if we don't collude with other municipalities to force private enterprise that is profiting off of the public right-of-way to share their data with us in the right way so that we can manage the street. And this means, very importantly, quantifying equity. Equity is simply a slogan unless you know how to define it and how to measure it. And this is a particular challenge with technology companies, is not only getting at the pattern of movement, but who is being moved. Particularly being able to parse by income, ethnicity, age, gender, ability, right? we need to make sure that, again, we're managing the public right-of-way for the larger public benefit. This also means that we need to be thoughtful about organizing government. Public transit agencies on their own suffer a structural failure. Public transit doesn't control its operating environment, and it's illegal for it to capture the value that it creates. Public transit has to work in close partnership with municipalities and with private developers in order to make sense of the urban system. And this also means that public transit has to get in the driver's seat right now around autonomous vehicle technology development and deployment. It is in urban bus rapid transit that should be the first rollout of AV technology, in part because with autonomous buses, we can operate every 2 or 3 minutes at no marginal cost, because so much of the current cost structure of public transit in America is driven by the operator. How many of you are leaders in your local labor union? Raise your hand. Thank you. Those of you who are not, you need to make sure that every time there's an event like this, you bring labor along, because unless we bring them along and get help labor to step it up and chart a good path forward, this is a disaster for labor and for fairness in our society. We've got to be better partners with organized labor. But finally, we need to tell better stories. For the last 70 years, automobile manufacturers have been convincing us that owning our own car will bring us freedom, autonomy, social status, and sex. That view is declining in part because there is something that brings us all of that, and it's the thing we're not allowed to use while we drive, but that vision collapses completely when the steering wheel goes away. And the automobile manufacturers are in a complete panic about this. We, as urban leaders, need to be telling more compelling stories about the unintended negative consequences of chasing the shiny object. But more importantly, thinking about a more positive vision. How many of you have seen Black Panther? So how many of you notice that, so when I drive my own personal vehicle, like I have this sort of illusion of power and authority, but that illusion comes at the expense of the safety and the accommodation of others. Black Panther uniquely has imagined a city of the future where mobility is inclusive and joyous, where moving about the city doesn't come at the expense of anyone. Could you imagine if technology were in the service of people rather than people being in the service of technology? And I think that's what this entire conference is going to be about. Thank you very much.